On today's episode, we had an awesome guest. His name is Chris Mills, and he calls himself an anti-financial advisor. So you'll need to stay tuned to understand what that means. He's a father of 8. He's a marathoner. He's a podcaster. He has a podcast called Money Ripples. Check it out. And he's got a brand new book out as well, which I don't have the name of in front of me right now, but we just finished the podcast and all the info is in there. And today's podcast was awesome. We've really had a deep chat around how you as a dad can start to get ahead. You know, some simple, straightforward steps that you can start today, but then also big pictures to where this can lead. Because one of the concepts we talked about is that there's always a trade-off. And there is always going to be a trade-off. Either you're going to hurt a little bit now or you're going to hurt a lot later. So what do you want to do? So what do you want to mention about today's episode before dads get to listen to it, Ev?
Yeah, I love that his stuff it's not what you hear from when you go into a bank and listen to a financial advisor, and it really is common sense stuff, but really not a lot of people are talking about this. And I love the way he delivers it. It's stuff that you can really capture and remember and implement easily. So you're going to get a ton of value out of this. Definitely listen to the whole episode.
Yeah, so some little snippets. He talks about the idea of being lean, liquid, and out. He talks about the concept that savers are losers. We also talked about how to get back on track if you go broke, because he went broke twice, like literally went from a millionaire to being on the welfare line and back again. And his idea of having a spending plan versus a budget. So if you guys want to know more about what's going on with all those things we just mentioned, just stay tuned. Warning, this podcast may cause excessive dad jokes, sudden bursts of motivation, and the irresistible urge to high-five yourself.
Welcome to the Daddiest Project, where we help dads master the biggest and messiest project of your life, dadhood.
I'm Scott Batcher, recovering perfectionist, dad of 1 teenage girl, and a guy who once didn't sleep for 6 months straight.
And I'm Evan Hill, professional chaos coordinator, dad of 3 teenagers, and living proof that duct tape can fix a sippy cup temporarily.
Each week, we'll hit you with real talk, dad hacks, and the kind of inspiration that doesn't require matching socks.
Ready to level up? Let's build this dad life together.
Hey dads, welcome to another episode of the Daddiest Podcast. Today, I am wearing, do you see this stuff? I'm wearing green, baby, because we're talking about money. So we've got Chris Mills on here, and I've interviewed him previously for another podcast of mine and had a great time. So I wanted to get him on this show because I know he's going to give some special value. But Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself this way. If I was a dad listening now and I want to learn about money and what I can do to make more money, save more money, do whatever, what are you going to offer as far as value for the listeners here to help them stay for the next 30, 45 minutes?
If you're sick and tired of hearing the traditional financial advice of save everything, spend nothing, save it forever, and hopefully someday you'll have something. If you're tired of that, then you should keep listening or keep watching, because we're going to talk about how I actually was able to achieve financial freedom twice by the time I was 39, where I call it work optional, where I had enough passive income coming in that I could work because I wanted to, not because I had to. And being a father of 8 kids, having that time with your children, be able to choose how to use your time, because it's not just money freedom, it's time freedom too, right? If you want that time now versus waiting decades when your kids are grown up and too busy to spend time with you, if you want that time back with them, that freedom to do so and live life on your terms, you should keep on this you should stay on this episode.
Okay, I'm buckled in.
Yeah.
Let's go.
So you already said something that I want to just unpack here, because this is a show for dads. 8 kids. How old are you? 112?
It's just about, yeah. And 48. That's where all the, I tell my kids all the gray hairs are from them,
Got a few myself. But what are the age groups? Like from what to what?
Yeah, my youngest just turned 10. My oldest is about to turn 22. So I would, of the 8, 7 of them are either teenagers or in their 20s at this point.
Wow. Yeah. So coming out the other side, I call it generally coming out of the cave.
Yeah, and a lot of them are hormonal teenage girls too. So it can get pretty exciting in our house.
Yeah. Both me and Evan have age groups of girls in that age. Yeah. So, we got an idea, but I mean, Ev's got three, I've got one. So eight, I can't even fathom.
Yeah, after a while, you just chain them all together. It's like a chain gang, right? You just kind of get them working on the railroad and just keeping them. We keep them working together, and you can manage it a little bit better.
Well, after three, they just take care of themselves, right?
Well, you hope so, right? They become like Gen Xers, you just like, okay, they're like latchkey kids now. They're just taking care of themselves, but no, they're great. And it's interesting as they do grow up and become more autonomous, it does allow you to kind of focus on the younger ones too. And they kind of learn from example for better or worse. So it's an exciting time for sure. And every kid's different, as anybody who's a parent of more than one child knows, is that each kid has their own personality. You have to, manage them differently, much like when you're in business managing employees. They're never all the same, right?
Absolutely. So you call yourself, what is it, the anti-financial advisor? You
Right.
alluded to that in your own intro. Give us an idea about what that is.
Yeah, I kind of, like you said, I alluded to it. It's going away from the traditional financial planner type of mentality, which is always sacrifice, suffer, and save, and do it forever. Set it aside, put it in their places, right? Put it in their funds, put it with them because that's how they get paid. And I had to break away from that. Funny enough, I actually was a financial advisor about 25 years ago. I had started out in that industry. I drank the Kool-Aid. I believed everything. I told myself and everybody else, I said, this is the path to freedom. You just save, you pay off your debt, do like what Dave Ramsey teaches you to do, right? Just do those things. And eventually, by the time you hit your 60s, you'll be financially free. Well, 4 years into it, my dad had reached out to me. He says, well, Chris, when are you going to advise me? So I had flown back home. I went to go see him there and sat at the same kitchen table where he told me, save everything. Because my dad was the penny pinching saver. He was the guy that was post-depression era. You save everything. You'd never throw anything away. Literally, he did not throw things away. I found that out here in the last few months as we've been cleaning out his house after he passed. But he didn't throw anything away, right? It's like you save everything just in case you need it. You buy everything on sale. I ate Cap and Crunch for an entire year straight because there was a case lot sale in Cap and Crunch. Fortunately, the next year, we switched to Fruity Pebbles, right? I mean, that's the kind of way I was raised. It's like you never ate anything unless it was on sale, usually reduced because it was past the poll date or something like that. And so sitting down with him, looking at his finances, I figured, okay, this guy, cheap penny pinching saver, he should be fine. And I looked at his numbers. He had paid off his house. He was 100% debt free. He had been saving for decades into his 401k retirement plan. And then I had to tell him, I said, Dad, here's the deal. If you try to retire right now at 61 years old, you're going to have to die in about 5 or 6 years because that's when you'll run out of money. He said, well, okay, Mr. Sunshine, I didn't want to hear that. What do I do? I said, I don't know. You did everything right from what I teach as a financial advisor. And so all I could tell him was, I don't know, work longer, save more. And that's all you can do. And so he did. He literally worked into his 70s. And this bothered me. This is towards the end of 2005. And I was really bothered by the fact that he had done everything right, but it hadn't worked. Even worse, a month later, I'm talking to a friend of mine who I trained to be a financial advisor, but then he quit to go do real estate investing. And as we're talking, I start debating with him. I said, oh no, real estate's not that great, because he told me, he said, well, listen, Chris, my dad and we've partnered on some real estate deals and we've doubled his income as a professor at the local university. I said, wait a minute, you've only been doing this for several months. That's too good to be true. There's no way that's possible. And he finally just stopped me. He says, well, Chris, how many of your clients are actually financially free where they don't worry about money? None, because they all worry about money. Even the retired ones worry about running out of money too soon. Good job, Chris. How about this? How many of you guys as financial advisors are financially free, not off the commissions you're earning, but actually doing these investments? And I said, oh, I don't know. There's guys been working here since the 1970s, and they look like they can't stop working. They look like they're stuck. So I'd have to say maybe none of them. There's your problem, Chris. And so he kind of woke me up to this whole other world of like alternative investments and doing things like in real estate where it was cash flow focused, not accumulation focused. It was about acceleration, not accumulation, right? And as I started to break into that world, eventually I quit as a financial advisor. I said, I can't teach this stuff and feel like I felt like I was a liar and a deceiver for what I was doing. And so I quit, vowed never to teach about money again. And I would just be a mortgage broker and I'll teach ballroom dancing on the side. And that's what I did in 2006. But I started to learn about real estate strategies and whatnot. And I learned, especially not just being the active investor, but I could be a passive investor where I invest my money with the active real estate investors and partner with them. And the next thing I know, later that year in 2006, I had enough income coming in each and every month that I was now work optional. I had enough money to work because I want to, not because I had to. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm 28, almost 29 years old, and I can retire? This seems crazy. I didn't even think I could get there that fast. Yeah. And so naturally, people would ask me, well, how'd you do what you did? And finally, the following year in 2007, I came out of retirement to teach people how I did what I did. And then, of course, it was a perfect time to start a business because the recession hit right then. Went from millionaire to literally welfare, where I was getting food stamps and things like that, and went broke over $1 million in debt. Had to dig out of that debt hole and then do it again. By the end of 2016, I was able to dig out of that hole, get enough passive income again, so then I was able to be work optional the second time. So if anything, I talk about, don't listen to the same old advice that hasn't worked anyways. I had to prove it twice in my own life, not because I'm a genius, but because I screwed up the first time, right? And I had to do it again. And that's something that I'm very proud of, not just for myself, but I've had so many more people, clients of ours, that have done the same thing where they've literally had enough money that they could retire, they could quit, but they still choose to work because a lot of them still want to work just like I do. You want to do something that fills your time, something that feels meaningful, and that's what they do. But the great thing is you bought your time back. And I think that's the real key here. And that's where I became the anti-financial advisor. Is I telling people, stay away from all that advice of set it and forget it and pay off your debt. It's just paying the advisors, but not paying you.
All right. So much to unpack there.
That's what I hear every single time when I tell that story. There's always so much to unpack, right?
Yeah. So, my head's spinning. Do you have any questions while I gather my thoughts here?
I think Chris, you just described totally how I feel about the whole thing as well. I read The Wealthy Barber very early on, and I was like going on that path, and I was looking at the numbers and the returns and all that with putting money into different places. And then I started to learn about real estate, and I was looking at those numbers and the cash flow, and I'm like, these are in just completely different leagues. Like I can fast track my money way faster with real estate, no doubt. And so that was the path I went down, and it was really thanks to Robert Kiyosaki and learning through the cash flow quadrant game, the cash flow game, and learning through that. That was where I had kind of an experiential, it's obviously not living life, but it's still like, hey, I'm out of the rat race, and that means that my residual is greater than my expenses. And to have that experience like viscerally as to what that could feel like, even if it's just in a game, was enough for me to be like, hey, I got to look further into this. So everything you're saying right now, I'm just like, yeah, this is totally what I think is uber important to focus on.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that, you really have to have this mindset shift. And it's funny because I read Rich Dad Poor Dad a couple times while I was a financial advisor. And even as I read it, I thought, oh yeah, Kiyosaki supports what I do. And he was completely telling people to ignore that advice, but yeah, as totally. You know how it is when you have a narrative, you want to make it work. And so I try to make it work forever. And the thing that took the book from theory to real practical application for me was understanding that perspective shift, because, I understood it conceptually. Yeah, have enough passive income coming in, whether it's from rent or whatever it might be, until you can finally retire. And I thought, well, real estate's horrible. Real estate only goes up 3 or 4% a year. It's not enough. But I realized a few things. I realized it wasn't about how much I saved up, because my dream in the early 2000s was to save up $2 million, live on 3%, hopefully do that by the time I was in my 40s, like now. And if I live on 3% a year, that's $60,000 a year, because I thought $5,000 a month was living the life. because 20 years ago it was, right? 20 years ago it was a decent average, actually above average for the American lifestyle. But now it's not. Now it's going to be, now it's already below average because of inflation, right? And so I thought, well, that's all I have to do. Just sacrifice, save, in fact, turn off the heat in the wintertime, turn off the AC in the summertime, save those $3 on my utility bills so I could put it away in my mutual funds, right? And what was fascinating was when I learned, like with real estate, for example, not just doing my own real estate, but when I could invest, like say I lend my money to real estate investors. At that time in 2006, there was real estate investors willing to pay me like 2% a month on my money. So if I had $100,000, it's paying me $2,000 a month, right? So think about that comparison. Remember, I wanted $5,000 a month, thinking I had to save up $2 million in the stock market to live on $5,000 a month. But all I needed was $250,000 to make 2% a month, and I was now making $5,000 a month. I didn't need $2 million. I needed $250,000. That's like almost a tenth less. And granted, nowadays it's not that rich. There's a reason why the real estate market crashed, because people were just so greedy. But even now, like I can loan my money at 1% a month. That means $100,000 pays me $1,000 a month, not $3,000 a year in the traditional financial advising role. It's $1,000 a month, $12,000 a year. And I think that's the big difference for me. That was my epiphany. My big awakening moment was, wait a minute, this wasn't about saving up money and accumulating money the whole time. This is simply about how can I get my money to work harder for me and be able to live off that income.
That's a huge realization.
Yeah.
So with money working harder for you, definitely know that the average dad out there is probably struggling, we'll say. Let's make up a character. George is 28. He's got 3 kids under 6. He's renting, and he's got enough to pay for groceries and a couple of little tiny luxuries. Doesn't go on a holiday because he doesn't have the money. How can George do something about this? Because I hear these money, all I needed was $250,000 and lend it out. And George is going, what? I don't have a quarter or 2 quarters to rub together.
I want a quarter first.
Where do you start?
Yeah, I actually talk about that in my book, The Work Optional Blueprint, which just got put on Amazon, became a bestseller here recently.
Nice.
There's 3 main, if I were to dumb
You should do an audiobook for that, hey?
I should, yeah.
Sorry, we were just talking about that in the pre-show.
Inside joke. I was literally recording the audiobook before I jumped on this podcast, but yeah, eventually we'll get the audiobook done too. So in that book, the 3 main concepts, if I were to summarize it, really come down to this: is get lean, get liquid, get out. Get lean, get liquid, get out. What does the get lean mean? Get lean means being a wise steward of your money, right? It doesn't mean living cheap, living on rice and beans like some people will teach, or cutting out that latte like others teach, right? It's not about just living cheap. It's really about being a wise steward of your money. Because understand, everybody teaches you to be a saver. Savers are still losers, because savers, they can never save enough. They can't pay off their debt fast enough. And even if they save money, they have to keep saving. My dad was a saver. It never felt like enough. And in a lot of ways, in some ways, it wasn't enough for him, right? And that's the problem with being a saver. They always rip on the spenders. And yes, spenders do live in scarcity because it's easy come, easy go, right? But the savers also live in scarcity because it's never enough. You can never have freedom where there's that kind of scarcity in your life. You'll never feel free. And that's what I find over and over. You need to become a steward. A steward takes the best of the spender and the saver and puts it in one person. Because savers, at least they're willing to think about their money and be wise with it. Unfortunately, they just sit on it. They park on it. They hoard it, right? And they don't really do much with it. Even if they put it in mutual funds or retirement accounts, still they set it and forget it, and they don't really do anything to make it work better. Spenders, at least, are willing to use the money, because money is meant to be used. It's meant to flow and grow, not stagnate and accumulate like the savers do. And so being a steward means we got to come from a more abundant perspective. So get lean, when we talk about that, it's not the saver perspective of just be cheap, cut all your costs, right? That's not what we mean. It means, what are the costs or the expenses in your life that actually are worthwhile? What are those bills that you know you need to be paying, right? You've got to pay for food. You got to pay for housing. We get this. You got to clothe you and your family. And that's a big responsibility. Speaking as a father myself, who's been in broke situations, it's not easy. By the way, until I was 28, almost 29, financially free, a little bit before that, I was broke. I was struggling to make ends meet because I was trying to be commission only financial advisor. Even a few years after that, in my early 30s, I was broke with a young family of 4 kids under the age of 5 at that time. In fact, I even lost my house during the week before my 4th child was born. And so that was a fun knock on the door. I had to beg the guy to let me stay in there 2 more weeks till we can have the baby. And then during postpartum, go and find a new place to live. Right. So I get it. So get lean means what are those expenses you could get rid of? And can you do something to increase your income? And here's the thing I'll have you remember is if you're in a place where you're like, I don't even have $100,000, $200,000. Well, your first goal is to get to $100,000 or $200,000. Now that might feel overwhelming because it is the hardest thing to do. The hardest thing is getting to that first $100,000. Once you get there, things start to get easier. There's a little bit of momentum there. But the problem is people will say, I got an extra $1,000 or $5,000. What do I do with it? My answer, nothing. Do nothing. Keep it safe. I don't care if you keep it in a bank savings account, keep it safe. Because the problem is every time somebody tries to do something like that, they're not ready for that next level. They blow it. They usually do something to lose the money because they're trying to shortcut it. And this is not a way to shortcut. You can get there faster, yes, but the way to do it by gambling with your money, shortcutting, doesn't work. So get lean means I'm going to be a wise steward, track my money every week. How much is coming in? How much is going out? While I'm doing that, can I do things to earn more income? I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then you want to get liquid, meaning get that money in savings. As you start, I don't care if you're starting with $2 a month. If that's all you can do, start saving $2 a month. Do an automatic deposit from your checking to your savings account. Have that money move over automatically. You don't even have to do anything. Just set it every day, every month. $2, $5, $20, $100, whatever it might be. Put that money away. And you'll realize pretty quickly that money starts to grow. You start to build a cushion. That has to come first. You've got to have that cushion. You got to have those emergency reserves, because I made the mistake of always trying to play offense. And when I didn't have that savings account, then all of a sudden now I'm freaking out because there's no defense. I'm like the quarterback in football that gets sacked because there's no line to protect me, right? You've got to have that there. Now, what should you do if you're at that place where you don't have a lot of money? Like I said, somebody who has $10,000, say they save up that much, they want to invest it. Here's the deal. You make 10% on $10,000. How much are you actually making in a year? $1,000, right? That's hardly anything. That going from $10,000 to $11,000 is not going to move the needle for you. The best way to move the needle in this particular situation is to figure out, how can I become more valuable to others? This was the secret I learned about money, because I used to think that I just had to work harder, get paid more for that hourly job, hourly wage job that I had. I just had to work more hours or get more overtime or whatever it might be. That wasn't the case. Yes, you could do that, but the better way to make more money was when I realized it wasn't about how do I make more money. I started asking questions like, how do I create more value for others? How do I serve people? How do I become a problem solver that I can then solve a problem where somebody's willing to pay for that service or for that solution? That is the key to financial freedom, at least to really building up that income. That's where income can become limitless. Understand that when I started to take that abundance perspective, that's when money became easier for me to make. When I started to say, well, how can I create a win-win for people? For example, when I was starting to do investing and things like that, I had a friend that asked me, he says, Chris, I know you're doing mortgages right now. Do you like doing mortgages? And I said, well, I like teaching them how to do it and the strategies they can use, but I absolutely despise paperwork. I can't stand paperwork. He said, well, why don't you find somebody else who likes to do paperwork? I said, well, that sounds simple. Why haven't I done it? Well, probably because I was living in scarcity, because I didn't want to have to share my money with somebody else to help me out. He said, well, if you hate it, why would you do it? Good point. So I asked the broker, I said, hey, is there somebody in this company that's a nerd that actually likes doing paperwork? He said, oh yeah, that's Clark. Because anybody who's named Clark will, of course, love love paperwork, right?
I was just going to say that Clark sounds like a paperwork guy.
That's right. He was destined from birth, or condemned since birth, however you want to look at it. So I went to Clark and I said, listen, Clark, if I send you clients that are ready to do stuff, but I send them to you to do all the mortgage, basically do all the work, will you do it for a 50-50 split? And he said, yes. I said, wow, really? Okay. I mean, yeah, that's great. I think that's fair. Cool. And so he did. And so I would teach people for a half an hour, an hour. It's like, here's what you can do. And you could cash out your equity, go and invest it. They're like, cool. How do I get my mortgage? I'm like, talk to Clark. And I would send them to Clark. Clark would do it. And the next thing I know, I see a check come in the mail for about a month or 2 months later. I thought, well, this is cool. And what else can I do this with? So I remember people, especially my age, being in my late 20s, a lot of people are getting engaged or married. And I remember I bought my engagement ring at a wholesale jeweler, right? This guy was like a third of the price of the normal stores. So I would tell people, I was like, listen, hey, you should go to this jeweler. You'll save so much money. And the jeweler had a referral program. The jeweler says, listen, if you send us any people, here's my card because it's appointment only, I'll pay you 5%. And so I started, when I knew people were getting engaged or married, I'm like, don't you dare go to that mall, that shopping mall, go to this guy, you'll pay a third of the price. And they would, and they were super happy. The jeweler was happy, and then they sent me a check and I was happy. And I started creating a win-win-win transaction. Now people call that affiliate marketing, but that wasn't it at all. It's just literally friends and family. I was just connecting because I'm like, hey, you have a need. I know a person. Even one of my friends started calling me Mr. Hookups because then they're just like, great, who do you know that does blank? And I would just connect them. I wouldn't make money off of most of that stuff, but if I was doing it on a regular basis, I would. And so between that and then my real estate, that's how I actually accelerated getting financial freedom, because I was working maybe a couple hours a week and I'm getting paid from doing almost none of the work, just being a connector and a teacher, right? And that was shocking to me because it was like, whoa, that just accelerated. I only needed $3,500 a month to live on, and now I'm making like over $5,000 a month, literally just between investing and connecting, and that was it. So that's the thing, is like, you can make a lot of money. It doesn't mean you have to do it that way. But, for example, if you work in a job, Warren Buffett says the same thing. The guy's heralded as the best investor of our time. He says, like, listen, your best thing to do if you want to fight inflation is get more skills. What kind of skills can you offer that's valuable to your employer or to the market, to the marketplace, or to your clients or customers? What can you do to develop that? Focus on that first, because it's way easier to become a better value creator, a better problem solver for people. And then all of a sudden with those problems, make an extra 10,000 a year. That's way better than making that extra $1,000 from your investment, right? That's the real secret to getting to that first 100,000. Once you get past the 100,000 or so, now we can start talking about getting that money out to create passive income.
So let's circle back. You said sort of your first bit of money you're saving, if you could put away $5 a day or whatever it is, which generally speaking, I believe it'll come back to a priority for people, right? Everyone, and I believe, you can argue this if you want, dads, if you want to put a comment in and argue this, but I believe that every dad out there can figure out something every day, whether it's $1 or $2 or $5. You might not be able to put away $25 a day, but $1 or $2 or $5, you could find it somewhere. So starting somewhere is a key. And you mentioned about that, we call it a safety net in our book, and getting a safety net so that you're not sacked by the quarterback, or you're not the quarterback being sacked. Do you have a specific recommendation as far as what would be what would be a dad's very, very first step? Put away whatever you can each day or week to get to a safety net of $5,000 or $10,000, and then is that something you recommend to just leave as your actual backup if things go crazy?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in today's environment, there's so much threat about unemployment, right? Layoffs, things of that nature, AI taking your job, right? All these things are being talked about right now. Having a savings is more important than investing, in my opinion, for most people, most Americans, and most people out there. So yes, definitely put away whatever you can. I would also say this: when you're tracking your money weekly, start analyzing, like, is this useful expense or not? Let me give you some examples, what I found, because we worked with hundreds of clients, and we found on average about $2,700, $2,800 a month of money that was wasted, right? And not even wasted, just money that was recaptured, so to speak. For example, when we started having people track money, we had one woman, she's like, I'm just too busy. I can't do it. I said, let's just do it. And finally, after pulling her teeth, it felt like she finally decided to track her money. Well, as we started to see the numbers, I said, well, wait a minute, you're paying $300 a month for cable. And he's like, yeah, her husband said, yeah, well, I love football. Okay, great. Well, I do too. But there's streaming services that can save you a lot more money than that. What if we switch to these streaming services that maybe total to be about $50 a month versus $300 a month? That's $250 a month back in your life. Another guy, they were only making $2,000 a month. So they were like below poverty line. And I started looking at their numbers. And what I found was they were paying $250 a month in overdraft fees, but they were only in the hole $200 a month. And I said, listen, if we could stop overdrafting, you'll actually be positive $50 a month. But the whole problem was they didn't have the timing right when paychecks would come in versus when the bills would be paid. So I said, here, why don't we move these bills to these dates, keep these over here, split this up a little bit throughout the month. Now you won't go into negative so badly. And all of a sudden now they went from in the hole every month, living on credit cards, to now having extra surplus, right? The worst case I saw when it came to food, eating out or food is a very big one I find a lot of times. This woman, she was eating out, and this is, by the way, in 2011 or 2010. Her eating out was $5,600 per month, $5,600 a month. I mean, that would be like in today, because now inflation's more than doubled that since then. I mean, that would be like you spending about $13,000 a month eating out or so, right?
And, that's like a couple of hundred a day.
A day. Yeah, it is.
Wow.
I know. I even told her, it's like, what are you doing? Like, are you eating lobster for breakfast? And she said, actually, that's not too far off. I was like, okay, here's the deal. I'm like, I didn't say go cold turkey. I said, what if we made your eating out budget? I actually didn't even say budget. I use the word spending plan because I think that's a better word than using budget. I hate budget. So I said, what if we change your spending plan for eating out to only, quote unquote, $1,000 a month, right? Which for some people, they would love having $1,000 a month eating out. Heck, I would love it. And so we said, let's just make it $1,000 a month. But that saves $4,600 a month right there. And so we did. We also found like health insurance premiums. They were overpaying on health insurance. Like, I bet you we can get you better. And so I sent them to a broker that I knew that could get them a better rate on that. So that saved them a few $100 a month there. We actually found a way to save them on taxes too. So by the time all was said and done, and even they started, even when they started shopping more, they even saved money on shopping because their daughter's boyfriend wanted to be a chef and was buying all this crappy food and stuff. So they're like, okay, we're going to get the groceries under control here, Mr. Chef. And the next thing you know, they're seriously saving over $70,000 a year, wow. From a $250,000 income too. So, I mean, think about it, $250,000 to save $70,000 a year is like, about a third of your income coming back to you. And so those are the things that you can do just by tracking your money. And so many people just don't do it. They just look at their bank balance or their checking account balance and think, okay, do I have enough? Okay, good. But if you really become proactive, this could, again, don't do it from a scarcity perspective, do it from an abundance perspective of how can I be a better steward of my money?
I love the term, the steward of your money, and looking at it as a spending plan, and just changing the verbiage a little bit, because saving's just boring. It really is. It's something that we need to do, but I like the idea of like the steward of the money. This is going to go here. This is going to flow here. Because money needs to flow, and some of it needs to flow to a place that is a safety net for us that's just held there. And we talk about it in our book under the prosperity section, as far as how much to have in our safety net. And I want to bounce this off you is to be able to cover 3 months of expenses, being a safety net. How do you feel about that number? I mean, you can double slap that if you want. That's what we put in there.
I keep increasing that number. I used to say 3 to 6 months. Now I'm saying about 6 to 12 months. Just because, and it depends on your situation. If you're someone who can really pick up a job easily, 3 to 6 months is probably more than sufficient. But I have a lot of clients lately that are like middle managers. Maybe they're making a few $100,000 a year. When they get unemployed, they're unemployed for like a year. And this is true. If you're a business owner, I think it's the same thing. You probably need at least a year's reserves too. There's a power. If you're a business owner and you've got savings, especially when you realize that savings is there as your safety net. What's amazing that I've discovered is that your psychology changes. Because if you know that it's feast or famine in business, right, and you don't have any savings, you're always going to be on this desperate hustle mode. And hustle mode is scarcity mode, and scarcity drives away people. Scarcity just repulses people, right? I call it business breath. You know, some people call it commission breath, you know, for those that, you know, have commission type sales jobs, right? I call it business breath because the truth is that if you're the guy with yeah, I can't remember what they're called anymore because I haven't used them forever. Business cards, you know those things. Remember those things? You know, now he's just like, here, drop it, beep. You know, but you know, business cards. You're throwing out business cards left and right, saying, call me," and people are like, why? Why should I? In fact, you're giving me this ick energy. I feel like I have to shower after talking to you. You know, those are the people that have to work 10 times harder to make the same dollar as someone who's relaxed, confident, knowing they don't need that one customer or that one client because they've gotten more than enough money to cover their family's needs. That person comes from a place of power. And ironically, when you don't need the business, that's when everybody wants to do business with you. Yeah. So that's another business hack I've learned is like having the savings. And for business owners, this is hard. Most business owners don't want to have savings. That's essential because if you have that savings, it puts you in a powerful position. You now have leverage. You now have the ability to say, nah, it's not good. This is not a good fit. Move on. Or, you know what? I can serve you. I don't need your money, but I know I can help you and you need me more than I need you. And that's a place of power that you can really take advantage of. And I'll tell you, business is just easier when you come from that place.
Definitely.
Awesome.
So your three are lean, liquid, and out.
Yes.
We haven't even touched on out.
Nope, not yet. Not with that 28-year-old.
Yeah. just I guess a big picture, and then I want to go back and kind of, I guess, wrap up with, you know, some really simple but concepts for that dad out there listening now to go, okay, like I get the big picture and this and that, but okay, what do I do right now? But let's talk about out for a few minutes.
Yeah. So get out is now saying as you start to build up that savings beyond your emergency fund, now you start to have cash. Like I said, it needs to be at least in the six figures of 100,000 cash in addition to your savings for emergencies. That once you get to that point, now you have options. And this is when I start to look at things like, where can I create passive income with this money? Now I say at least 100,000. The truth is I probably would say at least 200,000 because of this. Some investments, especially the ones that are hands off, might require a minimum of $100,000. And so if you go all in on that, and for whatever reason, if that doesn't go well, now you feel like you've lost everything. And so I like to make sure people diversify into different places. So I'll give you an example. I had a woman where she had about $250,000, right? She had about $250,000. It was interesting because she was in her 50s. She was a health coach. And she said, yeah, you know, I would love it. I could just health coach a few times in the morning and then have the rest of my day free. You know, she's like, I would do that even if I didn't need the money. I just love health coaching. And I said, okay, cool. Well, what do you need to do that? She's like, I need $2,000 a month. But when I met with the financial advisor, he told me I need to save up to $1 million. Because remember, $2,000 a month, $25,000 roughly. That's, you know, a little under $1 million she needed, about $800,000. And I said, okay, well, let's do this. $250,000. If you make 10%, how much is that per year? She took away the zero. She said, right, which is just over how much per month? 1,000. I said, here's the thing. Like at that time, like, you know, rental properties, like turnkey rentals, where again, you don't have to manage the property. Somebody else manages it. You just buy it, put the down payment on it. I said, between turnkey rentals and doing some lending and some other things, you can diversify your money in a few places and you could probably make it more than 10%, but I'm going to be conservative and just keep it at 10%. That's $25,000 a year. You could literally be financially free right now, like this year. And she, by the way, her goal was to do it in 10 years. And she's like, are you kidding me? Like, is that really possible? I said, it's just math. It's actually not hard to do. You just have to know the right places, right? And I find the right places usually in places that financial advisors will never tell you about. Because why? They don't get paid to tell you about those things. They don't tell you about real estate because they don't get paid on real estate. They literally only get paid on annuities, mutual funds, like retirement plans, those kind of things. In fact, that's what I learned as a financial advisor. I wasn't a financial expert having those licenses. I was literally licensed to sell you something, right? And it was only that little narrow thing. And that's what everybody tells you to do. The financial institutions are the ones that say you should be investing in these places. But the reason why you don't hear as many people like me, even though there's literally millions of us, like Evan was talking about too, right? We've done these things. We've actually proven it to work, but we're not like a big multi-billion dollar financial institution saying, hey, we're going to advertise on the Super Bowl because we know you're going to see those ads and then trust me, right? We don't do that stuff. We just do it and make money. There's millions of us that do that. And so that's what we can do. Like I mentioned, like even if I make 10% lending my money out, $100,000 makes $10,000 a year, right? And here's what gets to be fun. I call it not just compounding interest, because everybody talks about that in the financial advisor world. I like to compound income. Because take, for example, that same woman, right? Let's just say she's like, you know what? I want more than $2,000 a month. Forget that. I want to fight inflation more. Cool. What if she took that $25,000 she made, added it to her 250? Now she's got 275,000, making 10%. Now she's at 27,500 a year. She takes that money, reinvest it. Now she's over 30,000 a year the next year. Does that, reinvest it. Now she's at 33,000, and it keeps compounding the income. It grows bigger and bigger and bigger. It does this, right? That's what we go for. And that's where the financial freedom really happens. And the sad thing is, so many people are so close, especially those that do have savings, but they lock it up in prison, like their retirement accounts or their home equity. That's another place we sometimes find money. Found that with one client who's a farmer, that they're like, hey, we don't have millions of dollars like your clients. We're just simple people. We just need $5,000 a month. And I said, well, guess what? You can sell off some of your land. Cause I'm like, do you want all that land? They're like, no, actually we're debating about selling it. Sell it. You get $500,000 for it. Invest that at 10%. You make $50,000 a year. Reinvest that for 2 more years. You'll have a $60,000 a year. They're like, that's it? I'm like, yeah. Funny enough, you thought you weren't worthy. You thought you weren't in a place to have enough money. But guess what? You're becoming financially free faster than these other people that have like $500,000 or $1 million just lying around, because they spend more money. You don't. And so, because you're already lean and you can get this money out of your equity from your property. Now you can be liquid. Now we can get it out and produce income for you, right? So that's where it gets to be really fun, and that's where it gets to be rewarding.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. So a couple of things popped into my head around that, just from my own life. So, some of the dads out there might be listening. So say you have a house that you have a mortgage on, and I don't know, your auntie dies and you get 200 grand. Like, let's just talk about a dream scenario. So would the idea then, because your personal mortgage is not good debt, would you then put that into your mortgage to get that mortgage down and then redraw that as an equity loan to then be a business loan so that it can be a tax write-off?
It depends.
Or would you? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, some cases, some investments can be a business or tax write-off. In other cases, it can't be. So it really does depend, because a lot of times I see mortgages, especially lately, right, where mortgages are still below 4% for a lot of people. A lot of times we don't want to touch that thing. We want to leave it alone, but maybe we do a home equity line. So we may not even touch the mortgage. We might just leave it there, especially because with a mortgage, I mean, you get to write off the interest anyways. So even if you pay, say, 3.5% on your mortgage and then you write it off, just understand 3.5% is way less than inflation. Like, the real rate of inflation is not 3%, like the feds have been saying. They literally have been cooking these books since the 1970s, since Jimmy Carter, and every president has manipulated the numbers, Republicans, Democrats alike. They've manipulated the numbers so that they don't have to keep increasing the income as much on the Social Security, which has been running out, right? That's been a big concern ever since the baby boomers are starting to become adults. They're saying, wait a minute.
Are you saying that
baby boomers retire?
Are you saying the government is lying to us?
It's weird.
No way.
Really?
What?
And even our favorite president of all time history, even better than George Washington, that Donald J. Trump guy, at least he thinks he is, even he will say things that aren't true. He will overpromise and underdeliver, right? It's
God.
Weird. It's like a politician. But it's true. No, they've been doing it forever. But they've manipulated the numbers to where inflation is actually closer to about 9%, not 3%. Mm-hmm. So So when I see people saying, "Oh, I got a mortgage," even if they say it's 5%, well, who cares? You're writing off the interest and it's less than inflation. Why not use dollars down the road that are going to be worth less anyways? Because that's the thing, our dollar pays for less. Why not lock in the price of having that home now, having that mortgage, and then using that money, using the cheap money down the road to pay off your mortgage, not today. Often I'll have people pay their minimum payment on their mortgage and then invest the rest. So you get that rich aunt or whatever it might be, that $200,000 you get. Cool. Take that money and go immediately invest it. Start generating an extra, 20,000 a year from that. And then you can just keep reinvesting that and make it work. And who knows? Maybe we do something with your mortgage. Maybe we pay it off, because there are some people that just don't know what to do with the money. Maybe paying off the mortgage is the best thing. This is where stewardship comes into play. It depends on what kind of steward are you. Because if you would just gamble the money and blow it, well then no, pay off your house, right? And probably don't even get a line of credit, because you're just going to blow it. If you're a spender, that's a bad thing to have more money, right? Or have access to more money. If you're a saver, trying to have more debt just freaks you out, right? But if you're a steward, you're like, well, can I weigh it? And can I play it safe? Can I make sure that I'm putting my money in wise investments that I can get predictable, safer income coming off of it? And nothing's guaranteed, of course, right? But there's a lot of things you can do to make it easier on yourself, to make sure that there's less risk.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, is nothing is guaranteed, right? So some people might be listening going, well, that sounds really risky. And there's a risk in everything. There's a risk in keeping your money in your bank account or under your mattress. Somebody might come in, or the house might burn down, or there's a risk in everything, or like there's always a trade-off. And the trade-off is really important. There is no, and is, every time I talk about money, there is no easy road. There's got to be a trade-off somewhere along the way. There's got to be, some hardship. And that's where we grow, is in the hard times. If this was easy, everyone would be rich.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So from let's work backwards again and go, okay, well, where's some easy first steps? I've got 3 things in my mind, and then I want you to, I'll say, add to that or modify in whatever way you want for the dad that's listening to go, okay, I'm ready. What do I need to do? Where's the first steps? I think absolutely. I like number 1 for you is called the steward. Be a steward of your money. Track your money.
Yes.
Being a huge, huge one. Like literally, yes, this is where we just talked about. It can be painful. People say all the time, you've mentioned it twice. People are like, I don't have the time. Well, if you don't make the time now, you're not going to have the money later. So making some time, everyone's got a little bit of time they can devote towards it. Track that money. It doesn't have to be a spreadsheet, but if you're good at spreadsheets or Excel, go for it. You can write it down on a piece of paper, I guess. You might have a better way to do it. Number 2 is start some type of a savings to get that nest egg or that sort of safety net. And I'd say number 3 is get your book. Hold it up again.
Yeah. You took the words right out of my mouth.
The Work Optional Blueprint. Live free, be wealthy, make a difference, on Amazon right now. So what would you say to that? If that was like, would that be your top 3 things for like getting started today?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, track your money. If you like to use apps, there's things like Rocket Money, Monarch Money that are out there you can use, right? That help you do it more automated, so you don't have to do it on paper or with a spreadsheet. My wife loves a spreadsheet.
Rocket Money and
Rocket Money or Monarch is another one too. Monarch you might pay a little bit extra money for, but Rocket Money's become more popular, especially on the app side. Cool. It used to be Mint, but Mint's gone now, so too bad. But those are great ones. Sometimes your bank offers it, but usually those are better. So do that, yes. But then go to your bank and start transferring money. And here's the thing, as you find money to free up as you're tracking money, take that and make sure that's going to savings. Give every dollar a job, right? Make sure that you're like, ooh, I found an extra $100. Make sure you add that $100 on that monthly that's coming out, or it doesn't have to be monthly. It could be like every 2 weeks, because if you get paid every 2 weeks, it's a little bit easier to do $50 every 2 weeks. Great. Take that 100, make sure you get it in there, right? So capture those dollars. Definitely that builds up your savings account. And then, if you want to start building up, saying, okay, I'm starting to build my cash. Now, how do I learn about investing and whatnot? The book is a great option, of course. There's even our Money Ripples podcast. We talk about a lot of those subjects as well. Start to really understand the language, because it's not what you're going to learn from a financial advisor. That crap doesn't work, right? You got to stay away from that stuff. Like, you really want to go more towards what those of us that have been there, done that, and still doing it today, people that like us that actually are doing the real life things, learn from us and how we do what we do and how we think, then you can actually start to adopt that when it comes time to start investing.
Yeah, I'll give you my 2 cents about that too. I've been through 2 financial advisors. I won't name any names, but they were exactly that. They were salesmen. In my case, it was all about health insurance and insurances, because then they get their monthly residual from that.
Right.
So I didn't actually learn anything from my finances. I went backwards in both cases, and they made money off me. So I can be first to attest to, I like the idea of anti-financial advisor, because I've been burned twice. And, you know, if you go to a financial advisor and they start talking about insurance, my suggestion is run for the hills.
Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully for you, the third time's a better charm, right?
That's right.
That's why you're wearing green. You want that lucky charm.
Baby. Green, baby. You got any closing comments, Ev?
Well, I definitely like this idea better than sucking away every cent into Bitcoin and expecting to become a multi-gazillionaire after what we just saw over the last few weeks. Right? So how about being locked into that and going down that roller coaster? How fun is that?
Yeah, that'd be the worst. Hey, Ev, you wouldn't know what that feels like, but
I'd have no idea what it's like to lose money in crypto.
That's another inside joke, Chris. Ev lost a shit ton of money in crypto. Bought at the 2017 high, whatever it was, at the very high.
I actually did a podcast December of 2017 saying, hey, I think Bitcoin's going to crash from 20,000. And then it did, came all the way back down to 3,400. And when it got to about 6,000, that's when I decided to actually buy in. So it was funny. I told people, you know, Bitcoin, this is stupid. It doesn't have anything behind it, you know, but then a year or so later, I'm like, oh, this looks like a good time to buy. And so I did, and then sold off when it hit like around 60,000 and said, okay, I'm out, you know, and now I have like almost no Bitcoin. You know, it's like, if I lose, I don't care. I made all my money back. Right.
And
good.
Yeah. And Ev's done the opposite.
Yeah, I did the opposite.
It's hard. That's the thing. You even try to predict it. It's so hard to figure that stuff out. That's why I just stay away from that kind of stuff. It's just a guessing game. You know, you ever watched Robin Hood Men in Tights, that Mel Brooks movie? You know, that's he's got the blind guy in that movie called Blinken. He's up on a watchtower looking. He's like, I'm guessing no one's coming. They're like, get off the watchtower. You know, what are you doing up there?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I feel like when I try to like play the guessing game with like crypto or with stocks, you know, even though I know the stocks and things like that, I just don't know. You're just guessing.
Yeah,
that's right. It's like gambling, right? And so I can only assume one of your strategies would be to stay out of the casino.
Yeah,
but I knew a sesame seed, and the sesame seed couldn't leave the casino.
Man,
yeah, no, it's hard because he was on a roll.
Right. I see people do that with investing too, right? Like they get on a roll and they're like, yeah, but I don't want to get out. What if it keeps going up? You know, and I learned that when I was a stock trader, that if it keeps going up, who cares? If you make money, you won. You know, it doesn't matter where it goes up to. Like don't look back. You know, just take your profits and run and look the other way.
Yeah. I gotta also just echo your comment about mortgages and really taking a look at, is it worth paying off the mortgage? Because you were saying like the rate of inflation is not what they're saying it really is. And I think everybody knows that, you know, because we look at the price of food. It's kind of funny because like they say one thing, but then the reality is that this is not our experience. Our experience is that coffee is now $5 and it used to be $4. And that's not 3%. Like you're at 5%. Like it's not, you know. And to be taking the money. Like I'm a huge advocate of using the bank's money at the lowest rate possible for leverage. That's one of I love that. I think it's great to have your own money too. And if you can leverage that with the conjunction of the bank's money, for example, and if I can get it at 3% or 4%. And now I say have $1 million because I borrowed 800,000 of it or whatever it may be, and I can invest that. That's amazing. And I see a lot of people with that mentality of like, of trying to accelerate paying down their home and at a low interest rate at the same time. And I am totally curious about this, where you can put your money in to, like what you're saying, into maybe a real estate vehicle from the investing side. Like if, like I have things that I could be like, hey, I know the deal that I could put together and I could give somebody like 2,000 a month on X amount of dollars, for example. But I'm getting that, like, that's a very organized thing, that you're locked into. So I'm curious about that. If you could speak a bit more about that, I'd be
About
really
the investments or about the mortgage itself? Or
the,
debt?
the investment side, like you were saying, like an investment vehicle that's connected to real estate, for example, that can have those types of returns.
Yeah, I mean, it's so like you said, like let's just say we're talking about, debt, and maybe say the debt on the mortgage is, I would even go high, 7%, right? Naturally, you're going to want to beat 7%. You don't necessarily have to, because there are ways to still beat 7% with a lower interest when you're saving and compounding. But ideally, you want to get at least 7%. It changes, because I mentioned getting rentals. Rentals were fantastic up until about the interest rate started skyrocketing in 2023, 2022 to 2023. All of a sudden, now you're lucky to make a few bucks on a rental, right? But I remember the days when I could get a mortgage on a rental and still, even after paying property management fees, still make at least 12% a year just on the cash flow, not even on the appreciation of the house, just the cash flow, right? And so there are different times and seasons when certain investments work better than others. The last 3 years, I started talking to our clients saying, hey, you know what? I think lending is going to be a better place, but you have to find the right person. Because as they say, you're not just betting on the horse, you're betting on the jockey, right? It's not about whether somebody does real estate. It's about how well they are doing with real estate. Are they actually somebody who has been around a while? So I look for people that have been around for at least 15 years in the real estate game, people that actually have been there and they've done it and they're still doing it, and the problem is you get so many people that are like, oh yeah, I've been doing the real estate for 2 years, 3 years, give me money. No way. Like if you're going to be a guinea pig, go get your parents' money to blow or something like that. But don't use mine. I don't want to be your guinea pig. I want somebody who says, man, it's almost like the way you sounded, Evan, when you were like, man, just talking about savings bores me. I want somebody who says that about their investing strategy. They're like, I've done this so many hundreds of times. It's almost boring. It's just like, I could do this in my sleep. I'm like, awesome. You're the one I would rather put my money with. No different than if I were to invest in somebody's business, which has a lot more risk in some ways. If they're just like, yeah, like it's like clockwork. It just keeps doing this. My system keeps working and working. Okay, cool. Maybe I want to be invested in that system, right? Especially if it's not dependent upon you slaving away, So there's always those things that I look for. And yes, I mean, if you in that lending game, especially right now, making 9, 10, 12%. I had a friend reach out last week saying, hey, I'll offer you 15% for a short-term loan, 15% a year on my money. Now, of course, my biggest thing is I want a return of my money, not just return on my money. So I want to make sure it's safe. So even though he said that, I said, yeah, but I wonder if he's got some stress going on right now where I could possibly lose my money. I may not do that one. I might just go for the 10 or 12%, something that I know is a little bit safer. So that's kind of how I look at it is, can I out earn whatever I have in that debt or that loan? And even just in general, can I do something where at least I can get a return of my money and a return on my money? I don't believe in high risk creates high returns. I believe that high risk creates more loss. Because, if you think about risk, the definition of risk is chance of losing. So when they say high risk creates high returns, when did a better chance of losing become a better chance of winning? It doesn't. If that were the case, you might as well just go and put all your money in lottery tickets right now. By the way, that's not advice. It's just saying. Put all your money in lottery tickets. You'll probably lose. But hey, the reward is huge, right? And so I don't look for that. I look for how can I have certainty, but still have high returns that, for most people, 10% is a very high return.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
All right, Dad. So you got your first steps if you are looking to just get started into things. I know, Chris, you do like some, I guess, coaching around money as well. So what's your website or contact for dads if they're in a position where they're like, okay, I do have some of this squirreled away, but I'm not utilizing it properly. How can they contact you?
Yeah, Money Ripples is what you should remember, whether it's at Money Ripples on social media, moneyripples.com, the Money Ripples podcast. On our website, moneyripples.com, if you're somebody who has been squirreling away some money, and you get like, hey, I've got 100, 200,000 or so, we've actually got a work optional calculator you can fill out to find out how much passive income is actually possible in your situation. So we just ask like 10 different questions about your financial situation to see how much is really possible. So that's pretty cool. We do also have a quiz for those that are saying, yeah, I'm not at that point yet, but I make okay money, but I don't know where it's all going. We have another quiz that kind of helps you with that too. So we've got resources for anybody at whatever stage you're at, whether you're saying, I just need cash so that I can start saving, versus those that say, I've got cash, but what do I do with it?
Awesome. Fantastic. Is there any closing remarks you'd like to make, Chris? Anything we haven't discussed that you would like the dads to hear?
Yeah, I think speaking from a father's perspective, I know how tough it is, like how much pressure can come on you, especially if you are the breadwinner and you're the protector and the provider. And remember, I was in a place where I was broke, I was on welfare. I was in the whole $16,000 a month. Right. So I've felt the pressure. I know what it's like. It wasn't like I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth. It's tough. There's always hope, right? There's always a chance of success. And even if you feel like you're in a challenging situation right now, it's never permanent. It doesn't have to be. There's always an answer. And sometimes you're just one idea or one, person that you haven't met yet away from being able to change your life completely. So just remember is that you're not in it alone. There's more than enough resources and opportunities for you to be able to turn things around and really buy that time back with your family, with your kids, especially while your kids still want to be with you. That's definitely possible.
Thanks so much for being on the show. I remember last time we chatted, I was like, man, we got to get you on again because we've just scratched the surface of so many different topics. So I'd love to get you back again at some point in the future and just dive deeper into some topics. Again, thanks so much, Chris, for joining us.
Hey, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having
me. That's another episode in the books, dads. Remember, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither was dadhood.
True story. For more tools to build your best dad life, grab our book, The Daddiest Project, or join us at daddiest.com.
And hey, if you learned one thing today, you're already winning. Even if that one thing was never trust a 3-year-old with glitter.
Words to live by. Now go forth and dad like a pro.